The only Dynasty rookie wide receiver video that you guys will need leading up to the NFL draft. We're going to rank our top 15 Dynasty rookie wide receivers. We've watched the film. We've graded the analytics. We've gone through the entire process. We are just a couple days away from the 2025 NFL draft. So we got to get the receipt checker out there, get our final rankings out before the NFL draft comes along and changes everything with draft capital and landing spots. But this one will be a fun video. For the purposes of this video, we are going to start with Travis Hunter, who is obviously up in the air still if he's going to play wide receiver. But given that he is like minus 500 to go to the Cleveland Browns, who have said they'd play him at wide receiver, we are going to value him as such. And he is both of our wide receiver ones. The body control, the ability in space, the football IQ, the elite hands, the separation ability. It's all there for Travis Hunter. Play strength is an issue. A little bit of a leaner wide receiver. Don't know if he's going to play cornerback a lot. Those are the strengths and weaknesses. That is basically what we got. When you look at the fact that he was one of the top receivers in this class with a 68.8% contested catch rate in a class with a lot of big wide receivers who have size advantages, the fact that he is number one in the class and that metric just shows how great he is at the catch point. My comp for him was Garrett Wilson. Your comp for him was a young Odell Beckham Jr. His comps in the prospect model are the likes of Garrett Wilson, of Justin Jefferson, of Jackson Smith and Jigba, while not playing full-time wide receiver until his junior season.
Yeah, when you contextualize his usage, he's a guy that was outside on 94% of his charted routes, on the line 90% of his charted routes, and on top of that, predominantly only played in 3, 4, or 5 wide receiver sets. His expected yards per route run was 1.27, which was the lowest in the class. And like you said, he completely obliterated that with his actualized yards per route run. When you watch Travis Hunter play, it is quite simply as he moves differently than anybody on the field, and quite frankly, moves differently than anybody that I have ever seen at the wide receiver position, hence the Odell Beckham Jr. comp. I truly think we are looking at a gold jacket level wide receiver, and if he does go to Cleveland, which is the favored betting market right now, we could be talking about a guy that can threaten Ashton Genty at the 101.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's that talented, man. You don't get 0.51 EPA per target's a top 5 mark in the class. And like you said, he was on the field with other NFL talent players, LeVonte Wester, Jimmy Horn Jr., Will Shepard. They're all probably going to at least be priority undrafted free agents or better in the NFL. And he's able to out-target those guys like to a dominant level. He had 16 touchdowns this year, which led all wide receivers in college football. And again, keep in mind that as a freshman at Jackson State, he played 15% of the snaps on offense. As a sophomore at Colorado, he played 50% of the routes on offense. This year was his first year playing full-time wide receiver.
Yeah, and he wasn't even in wide receiver meetings. He wasn't even in offensive meetings. He would just show up on game day, get his snaps at wide receiver, and he did what he did. There's a reason why he was the Heisman Trophy winner, and there's a reason why I think he's going to be a generational player. And in fact, I actually made this claim on a recent live stream we did when we were over in New York. But if he does play wide receiver full-time, if we did get that confirmation, which we've already been hinted at from Andrew Berry, what's stopping him from ascending to the wide receiver 1 overall in Dynasty?
Yeah, and when it comes to like how to value this guy, remember in 2021, Danny, that you really wanted one of those top corners. You wanted Pat Surtain, J.C. Horn for the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously worked out for you. You got the Micah Parsons in that draft. But imagine if you could both draft Devontae Smith and J.C. Horn in the same player, because that's essentially what you're getting with Travis Hunter here. Wouldn't that guy be worthy of going second overall in that draft class?
Yeah, he would be. And it's funny because I also think just looking strictly at Devontae Smith, it would be an insult to compare to Travis Hunter to Devontae Smith. I think we're looking at even a higher echelon of ceiling at wide receiver.
Yeah, it's bold to say about the guy with the best receiver season of all time in college football with Devontae Smith. But yeah, that's just how good Hunter is. I never want to hear someone say that Travis Hunter was an average corner and an average wide receiver. He was top 5 in both. Let's get a spade.
Number 1 in both.
Yeah, literally in this class for sure. So Hunter Glaze aside, he is our 102 in rookie drafts. That's where we're comfortable taking him. Again, depending on what kind of reports we get of how his usage is going to be and all that kind of stuff. For us, we're just going to trust the guy that probably will put a gold jacket on someday. And if he's playing wide receiver full-time, which is what Cleveland will probably do with him, then we are going to take him 102. We'll maybe adjust that depending on reports that we get 1-3, 1-4, 1-5, something like that. But he's probably going to be a very highly ranking player for us. Same goes for Tetairoa McMillan, who's had a little bit of a fall from grace as of late. in terms of what people are thinking about him. But here's the reality of the situation. Analytically, he stacks up with any prospect that you can put him against. Fifth in the prospect model, just behind Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, CeeDee Lamb, and Jamar Chase in terms of his overall FSC grade. Ball winner, size, athletic, press coverage, yards after catch, especially for that size. It is so impressive how fluid he is. Obviously needs to work on some route running polish. 2024 had a little bit of a taper off as the season went along, but Noah Fafita had a lot worse of a season in 24 than he did in 23. And then he did have some drops. A lot of NFL scouts seem to be worried about his like initial burst or his polish on his route running. I think all of that stuff is correctable. I think everything is there for Tetairoa McMillan to be one of the best receivers in the league someday, but it's probably going to take him a year, maybe 2 years. And hopefully he's able to produce while still getting better. The way that we saw like Brian Thomas Jr., for example, last year, I thought he was going to be a little bit of a raw prospect coming into the league, but he, in one training camp, basically fixed all the problems he had at LSU.
Yeah, and the way I describe Tetairoa McMillan is he is your modern day big wide receiver. He's got the size to be able to play on the outside, to play that true X position. But I also think he can be your modern power slot. He can slide inside. He can give you Drake London toughness after the catch, ability after the catch. He's got a little bit of that Puka Nacua movement ability in the open field. When I'm watching Tetairoa McMillan, I just don't understand why the growing sentiment is that this guy's not worth a top 10, top 15 overall pick, like we've heard from the Daniel Jeremiahs, like we've heard from the Mel Kipers. Apparently, he will potentially slide on draft day, because I see a guy that I'd be comfortable taking in the top 8, top 10 overall of the NFL draft. And if the NFL doesn't see it that way, sounds like we might get a little bit of a discount in our rookie drafts.
Yeah, and when it comes from an athletic standpoint, people have worries about it. I mean, he ran anywhere between a 4.48 and a 4.55 at his pro day. RAS Math Bomb has him listed as a 4.53, which if you get that going and you get an unofficial relative athletic score, we're talking about a 9.19 relative athletic score. And that's if he had kind of average jumps as well, and an 89th percentile speed score. So same thing we said for Drake London a couple of years ago. People, for whatever reason, thought he wasn't an athletic guy. It's like, you're not a multi-sport star at USC being a bad athlete. And the same can be said for Ted McMillan. He was like a world-class volleyball player in high school too. Like, he has the ability athletically to be one of the more dominant receivers in the league.
Yeah, and just being that fluid at that size, 6'4", nearly 220 pounds, you watch the tape on him and he is outrunning, he's outmaneuvering DBs in the open field. You just typically don't see that from a guy with those dimensions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we can move into the next year. Again, Ted McMillan, he's going to go anywhere between 103 to 105, I would say, depending on where he goes, where he gets drafted, what landing spot he goes to. I talked about it in his tail of the tape. I think one of his better landing spots would be like the Broncos, being used as like a long-term number 1. Obviously, Danny wants him at number 12 to the Dallas Cowboys. I think from like a fantasy ceiling standpoint, people might have concerns that he gets, alphaed by CeeDee Lamb or whatever. I would probably take the discount. I think there's a chance that he would slide in the NFL or in rookie drafts to like 104, 105 if he is a Dallas Cowboy. So maybe that's the best case scenario for you and I who want to get shares of this dude.
Yeah, and just my final input on that. If he were to be a Dallas Cowboy, yeah, sure. Maybe he doesn't have the 170 plus target ceiling because you do have a guy like CeeDee Lamb there. But attaching yourself to a quarterback that has 35 plus passing touchdown equity if he stays healthy for a guy that can score 10, 12 plus touchdowns a year is going to be valuable in its own right. Just look at T. Higgins over in Cincinnati.
Yeah, you got T. Higgins is 26 years old now. How about you re-roll on a 22-year-old T. Higgins in that same situation? So moving into the next tier of guys, and I would say generally this is pretty consensus, these 3 players that we have in here in some order. I would imagine most people don't have any different names here, but it is worth noting kind of there is a minor drop-off in terms of probably what the dynasty ceiling is of some of these players, except for the one guy who we'll talk about is a little bit more risky. But Emeka Egbuka is my number 3 receiver. He's not your number 3 receiver. We can start with him. 6'1", 202 pounds. He's got the size, 22.7 years old. Hands, route running, especially against zone coverage, absolutely dominated at Ohio State the last couple of years. Strong yards after catch ability. Obviously, we saw the athleticism on display at his pro day, a 9.71 RAS score with a 4.45 officially 80th percentile speed score. I just think he's a complete receiver, man. I think he can do everything you ask of him. Just because he was alphaed by 2 of the best receiver prospects that we're ever going to see with Marvin Harrison Jr., and of course, freshman phenom Jeremiah Smith, and not to mention he played with Garrett Wilson, he played with Chris Olave, he played with Jackson Smith and Jigba, played with Carnell Tate, played with all these other dudes that are going to be or are high-end wide receivers in the NFL already. And there's a little bit of a concern that he might be a slot receiver in the NFL. But my thought process is this. If you tell me this guy is Chris Godwin, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jackson Smith and Jigba, one of these dudes that is a slot receiver, or at least is better in the slot than he is on the outside, I don't care, man. This is the modern NFL. You get these guys PPR targets. That's all that matters to us.
Yeah, 100%. And again, people are going to overthink Egbuka because they're going to hear that slot only narrative. But I think Matt Harmon really addressed that rumor, addressed that concern when he talked about him in his RP profile. He's not slot only, he's slot mostly. And slot mostly means you can play the slot 60 to 80% of the time. But when you need to go out on the outside and win big boy routes against press coverage, I think Emeka Egbuka will be able to do that at a high enough level to be able to stay on the field in 2 wide receiver sets. And that's really all we need. Yeah, sure. Maybe he is not the most ideal player to play 100% of his snaps on the outside, but can he just suffice in 2 wide receiver sets? Because for the most part, if you draft Emeka Egbuka, you're probably going to be running a lot of 3 wide receiver sets anyways.
Well, and you think about last year, like we want all these receiver prospects to be number 1 outside X receivers all the time. And look at Marvin Harrison. It would have benefited him to be moved around the formation quite a bit. So I think that versatility is actually a good thing. And I said it in Emeka Egbuka's Tail of the Tape, like Justin Jefferson was a primary slot in college.
Yep.
AJ Brown was a primary slot in college. Malik Neighbors was a primary slot in college. Jackson Smith and Jigba, a primary slot in college. Like just because you were asked to do something, which is what I think the case is here for Egbuka, doesn't mean you can't do the other thing. Like he played on the outside more in his sophomore year, which just so happened to be his best season. So I do think that he is a lot more versatile than people give him credit for. He was just asked to play a certain role. And here's the other thing with Egbuka. The intangible stuff, the stuff that we can't really measure, it's all there for him. A lot of Ohio State teammates say, we don't win a national championship without this dude. He blocks his ass off. He's tough. He's a dog. He has all of the qualities that Chris Godwin has, which is why that's my comp for him.
Yeah, and I can see I do assume he goes in the first round, but if he were to somehow slip to the early portion of the second,
he's minus money to go in the first round.
He's minus money. I was just saying if he slipped even to the back end of the first round, I can see Liam Cohen getting aggressive and going up and getting him because, like you said, you have the Chris Godwin comp, especially the versatility with the blocking scheme he's able to do. You know, the wham blocks, the across the formation blocks. I can see Liam Cohen getting the best out of Egbuka, and I can see, like I said, if the Jaguars, let's just say, take Ashton Genty at 5 and wanted to move up and get another weapon on the offense, I think Egbuka would fit to a T.
Yeah, I think the Broncos are his best landing spot, but the Patriots would be a great landing spot for him. The Raiders a great landing spot for him. The Chargers a great landing spot for him. Panthers a great landing spot for him. Like you mentioned the Jaguars, I think they would be awesome for him too. I think Washington would be a good landing spot for him. You play, slot receiver early on in your career, learn some things from Debo and Terry McLaurin. Eventually, maybe you're the long-term number 1 because both the receivers there are 29, 30 years old. Like there's a lot of great landing spots where Egbuka is going to go. I've seen Green Bay as a common landing spot for him too. There's a ton of great landing spots where he could go.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you said, more than likely going to be a first-round pick. Just in the instance he started slipping a little bit, I can see the Jaguars getting very aggressive to go up and get him. But you mentioned your wide receiver 3, 88.0. I have an 86.5 on Egbuka. My wide receiver 3, technically, because I do have an 86.5. So theoretically, if you just looked at it, Egbuka and Luther Burden, my wide receiver 3, have the same grade. The tiebreaker for me is just, I think the overall ceiling and what I can get from an NFL coaching staff to really unlock Luther Burden can make him one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I really do. I understand that when you just solely look at the production this year, when you solely look at the usage, it is a concern. I see DJ Moore. I see a guy that wasn't asked a ton to win down the field, but had the arrogant hands, had the ability to stack DBs to win down the field when he was asked to do it. I really just look at a guy like Luther Burden as being mismanaged at Missouri. And I do think if he goes, whether it's the top 20, whether it's the top 30, again, there are some rumblings, maybe he'll slip in the draft. Regardless, I think the team that selects him will have a plan for how to utilize him at the next level.
Yeah, there's 3 receivers in this class that are first team all movement ability. Like Travis Hunter is obviously the king of that. Then you got Tet McMillan given his size, and then Luther Burden's the other one where you get him in open space. You see the instincts that he has to just find open space. You see the movement.
Best yak player
if you can get him in open space or at the top of route trees to use that ability to become a better route runner, that's where the ceiling really lies. Like there was a time last year being that time that we thought this dude could be the next Malik Neighbors potentially because Malik Neighbors has that ability.
Yeah, Malik Neighbors, Jamar Chase, and analytically stacking when you looked after that sophomore year, it was valid because, I mean, this was a guy that we said, can he lead college football in receiving this past year? Unfortunately, the production was down. I do think both the Missouri quarterback play as well as the coaching was lackluster because when you watch Luther Burden, his movement ability, like you said, explodes off the screen. I think he is quite clearly the best yak player in this class. Maybe Travis Hunter also has a claim, so I'm not going to say clearly, but I think those are the clear top 2 yak players in this class. And if he does land in the right situation, whether that's, again, maybe even if he does slip to the early second and he landed with the Patriots or with a team like the Jaguars, for example, I mentioned with Egbuka, where he could slide inside initially, he can be used in space as that creator. I think that would be the best fit for him at the next level.
Yeah, and
Titans.
I look at this whole list because obviously it's going to be covered up for those of you guys watching. But of all these 15 receivers, who had the single most impressive season of any of them? The answer is Luther Burden's sophomore year. Like that, and it's including Travis Hunter's Heisman winning season this year. Like because obviously he's playing cornerback as well. Luther's sophomore year at 19 years old was so impressive to the point that both of us assumed he'd be a top 5 to top 10 pick. Like I think if Burden had a monster year this year, he's going 4th overall to New England.
Well, let me ask you, if he took the Jamar Chase route and he sat out this entire year, where do you think he goes in the NFL draft versus where is he looked at right now?
I think both the Jaguars and Patriots would be interested in taking him 4 or 5, at the very least Carolina and the New York Jets at 7 and 8.
Yeah, so when we're looking at it, it's just about him unlocking that level of play again, which as a 22-year-old just turned 22, I'm fully bought in with the right coaching staff. They can unlock that level of ceiling.
Yeah, and I've talked about Burden being a little bit lower on the route refinement, the ability to beat press coverage because he didn't really see it. The down junior year where he was quite literally outproduced by Theo Weiss Jr., who probably won't get drafted in this draft. Slot usage, he's raw. Like, get him with the right coaching staff and watch him go. Like you mentioned Liam Cohen. I really love the Sean Payton fit for him too. I just somebody on the Broncos draft a receiver, please. The Cardinals, I think, would be a half decent landing spot for him as well. I think the Cowboys would be a good landing spot for him in the early second round. I like the Bengals even potentially if they wanted to get just like a gadget guy to use early on in his career. And then, the NFL stands for not for long. You never know how long T. Higgins, Jamar Chase will be around for 2 to 3 years down the road or whatever. Denver Broncos, like I said, would be an ideal spot for him. And I also don't mind the Pittsburgh Steelers as a landing spot for him as well. He's just the type of dude that's going to need time. He's going to need development. And that's what scares me as a dynasty player, because if I'm on the board at 108, 107, wherever Emeka Egbuka and Luther Burden are going off the board, I feel very confident that Emeka Egbuka will get on the field right away for an NFL team and contribute. Whereas Burden, what if he's a face planner after his rookie season?
Yeah, and I think that's a very valid concern. Again, they both had the same 86.5 grade for me, which would be a top 25 level talent. It's just about what's your flavor. I think Egbuka is a rock solid bet to be a double or a triple, but I do think Luther Burden has higher upside to potentially be that home run. I think if you had to ask me who's more likely to be a top 12 dynasty wide receiver, I would say Emeka Egbuka. If you had to ask me who's more likely to be a top 5 dynasty wide receiver, I would say Burden.
Yeah, I saw somebody float out a comp that I actually have never heard for Luther Burden, and I actually really like it. And someone comped him to Zay Flowers, which I thought was like a decent comp for him because that's how you can use him early on in his career. And Flowers doesn't really run a full route tree, but he can, right? Like Harmon's been big on Zay Flowers for a while. He's like, they should use him like as a full-time X receiver or whatever. But they kind of use him a little bit horizontally, which is kind of maybe a good thing for Burden early on in his career. And Flowers was a senior coming out versus Burden being a junior coming out. So that's one that I also really, really like as potentially a comp for what his career could look like, where it's like, hey, good rookie season, let's build upon it second year. And we saw, top 24 season out of Flowers his second season.
Yeah, and for those Jags fans who ended up watching the What We Would Do mock, this is the reason why I would be comfortable taking Burden where I did. It was a trade down scenario. It was 10th overall. I personally would be comfortable taking him in the top 15. It's just the unfortunate sentiment that maybe the NFL is lower on this wide receiver class comparatively to where we are.
Plus money to go in the first round right now, plus 175.
Yeah.
So he is likely actually go to round 2. So the Patriots, the Raiders, the Titans, some of those early round 2 teams would be potential landing spots for him.
Patriots learning under Stephon Diggs, not having the pressure of playing X right away. Sign me the heck up. You guys know my thoughts on Drake May. Let's make some magic.
Yeah, that would be a really fun landing spot for him. That'd be full circle to what we just said. Like we thought maybe he'd be a Patriot this time last year after his 2023 season. Getting in the second round would be great. Hook him, Matthew Golden. Next up here, we both have him wide receiver 5. definitely a very divisive subject in the dynasty community, more so than in the NFL draft community. I think everyone in the NFL draft community believes that he belongs in this category. We as dynasty players are probably in the minority here, having him at least in the same conversation as these other two guys, because Egbuka and Burden just produced at such a high level for big, SEC and Big Ten caliber schools here, where Texas, yeah, he produced at the end of the season. Yeah, he produced in the college football playoff, but it was like a 4 or 5 game sample size. We didn't see much production out of him at Houston for the first 2 years of his career. He is a great separator from what I watch. He's a great hands catcher. He's definitely attacks the football. Technician, had some great downfield usage, really solid after the catch. We saw that 4.29 at the combine. So, he has capable enough speed and athleticism at 5'11", 190 pounds. He's not really going to wow you with power or with, strength at the catch point or anything. And physicality and zone coverage awareness and some of the polish of learning how to play the wide receiver position probably comes a little bit lagging because he wasn't really a stud producer for 3 years or anything like that. But my comp for him is kind of like a bigger Jordan Addison. I think that's an interesting comp for him. And you have a Stephon Diggs light for him as well, which is obviously very high praise. I would say that if he does become Stephon Diggs, it's going to probably take a couple of years.
Yeah.
But dude, he's just got good film. You just watch the film and you go, Quinn Ewers missed him there, and that's a late throw there, and he's open here. That's just the type of film he has.
It's pretty simple. He's got juice, and he can win at all 3 levels. And I understand that when you look at his college career holistically, you think, well, if he's so good, why wasn't he productive? Well, this year, like he said, transferred over to Texas, didn't really get full-time play really until week 11. And we saw week 11 on. So the Kentucky game, Texas A&M game, Georgia game, Clemson game, Arizona State game, and the Ohio State game, a.k.a. the biggest, most important stretch of your guys' season. 86 yards against Kentucky, SEC team. 73 yards against Texas A&M in a 17-7 win right before the SEC championship. Obviously, in the SEC championship, going up against Georgia. We know how many NFL guys they have. 8 catches, 162 yards. Also had 149 in that game against Arizona State, that double OT game. Really, he is the biggest contextual player in this game, or in this class. If you just look at his college career holistically, like I said, you're going to see, for example, the big analytics guys are going to be completely off of Matthew Golden. He is the trust the tape bro of this class. I truly think he's worth a first-round pick in this draft class. And like you said, Jordan Addison, I would say, would probably be about the 80th percentile, but I even think he's a better route runner than Addison was coming out. Hence why I think if he can develop that physicality to his game like we saw from Stephon Diggs, he can kind of be a similar version to what we saw from Minnesota Diggs. Obviously, once Diggs went to Buffalo, he really took that next step in his career, but I'm more so citing the young, early career Minnesota Vikings Stephon Diggs here.
Yeah, dude. He's an interesting player. Me and you sat here last year. I had McConkey wide receiver 6 or 5 going into the draft. You had him 6, I believe, or maybe 5 as well.
5.
We sat here and said, yeah, he's just good enough to go this high. And just because, yards per route run wise, Ladd McConkey was better than Matthew Golden. You want to hear some metrics that Matthew Golden shines in? His career touchdown rate is 16%, which is second highest in this class. His EPA per target this year was top 4 in this class. His contested catch rate was top 9 in this class, despite being undersized. Boom play percentage, top 5 in this class. Positive play percentage, 6th in this class. Yards per catch, 5th in this class. He doesn't have the same metrics that he pops in like Ladd McConkey, like the yards per route run and some of the other ones, but he does pop in some metrics.
Yeah, it's simple as, despite being 191 pounds, he can beat press, he can line up on the outside, and he can win at all 3 levels. Once you bake in the analytical profile, that's where he kind of falls more so to the late first, early second range of our personal prospect rankings. But if you're just talking about the tape, you could even make the case he's higher than 5 in this class.
Yeah, my prospect model says that Tre Harris and Jayden Higgins are better than him, and I just don't frankly agree with that. I just think he's a better player than both of those guys, which is why in the prospect model videos, it's not verbatim. It's more of a guide that brings you to a certain point. And I'm just going to go against what it says on Matthew Golden, because it said the same thing about McConkey last year, that some of the other prospects below him were better prospects. And I just didn't agree based on what I saw from him on film. So that's the end of the first round rookie pick tier, where, any one of these dudes, Egbuka, Burden, or Golden, could go as high as let's say 106, 107, 108, depending on where they go, when they get drafted and all that kind of stuff. But they also could go as low as 110, 111, 112 if they, we get great landing spots in capital for all the running backs and the tight ends and the quarterbacks and all that kind of stuff. It's just going to shift the position group around a little bit. Right now, I have Egbuka from a talent standpoint at 106. I have Burden at 109, and I have Golden at 112. So they're all kind of in that range for me.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I understand, like, in the 3 total years, okay, he's never had a 1,000-yard year. This is the last thing I will say. He also had a very relatively productive freshman year as well. 584 yards, 7 touchdowns as a true
He was
freshman.
hurt his whole sophomore year too.
He was hurt his whole sophomore year, and then, like you said, didn't really get that full playing time bump until week 11, which he averaged 82 yards per game down the stretch in the biggest games for Texas.
Yeah, for sure. So let's move into the second round rookie pick tier. And obviously, this goes with a huge caveat saying that in the second round of rookie drafts, you're going to probably have some great tight end options. You're going to probably have some quarterbacks potentially, by the sounds of it, like late first round, early second round draft capital in the NFL draft quarterbacks. And more importantly, this running back class is so good that you might want to lean running back in this area of the draft. But I actually really like this tier of wide receivers. I really do think that there's a lot of good contributing pieces here to NFL offenses. My favorite of this group, my wide receiver 6, is Jayden Higgins, who's 6'4", 214 pounds, barely 22 years old right now, despite being a 4-year player. Prototype X size. Obviously, that's a great size profile. Very strong hands. Produced at a really high level, especially the last 2 seasons at Iowa State after he transferred in. Sudden breaks at the top of his routes, which is really rare for a big wide receiver. Very tough, very physical. The only problems that I have with his game is that I would say he kind of has average 0 to 10 yard burst, and he has average yards after catch ability, and, average for his size, probably below average in total. And his release package was not fully developed yet. So he has some things to work on. I think him getting a little bit more sudden out of his breaks, like I said, just from like a 0 to 10 yard quickness standpoint, would do him a lot of good, because athletically, he has no real problem with that. He has a 9.63 relative athletic score, which is on par with like Nico Collins when you stack it up. So you're talking about a real like high level athlete. My comp for him is like Cortland Sutton. I think he can be a solid second round pick. NFL mock database has him as like about a late second round expected draft capital, and he could develop into a number 2 receiver by year 2, by year 3 of his career.
Yeah, and my comp for him was a hybrid between like a Jawan Jennings power forward style wide receiver, and if he can develop his nuance as a route runner, kind of like a Michael Pittman. So when it comes to Jayden Higgins, if you're getting that type of range of outcomes in the second round for a guy that is under 23 years old, 22.3 years old, we have him measured at, with that 6'4", 214-pound dimension, you're just looking at the sheer size. The only one in this class that really compares to that level of size at the top of this wide receiver class is the guy that we have at the top there with Tetairoa McMillan. So with Jayden Higgins, again, productive. The efficiency metrics are there. The overall production, like I said, is there. Should be a top 50-ish level pick in the NFL draft. There's really just no holes across the board for a second round caliber rookie pick.
Yeah, not to mention, he's 4th in this class with 9.92 targets per game this year, despite his teammate Jaylin Noel also being a top 12 receiver for us. So he's producing alongside NFL competition. He was 2nd in this class with a 90.5 PFF receiving grade, one of the lowest career drop percentages in this class at 3%. Like I said, very sure-handed guy. And his yards per team pass attempt and all those other advanced metrics, he stacks up really, really well in the prospect model. I believe he's like the 4th highest rated receiver, the 5th highest rated receiver in the prospect model. So it actually thinks that we're a little bit too low on him relative to what the prospect model thinks. So Higgins is one of those guys that I'm going to end up with a lot of. I hope, to be honest, he goes to kind of like a subpar landing spot, at least in terms of like quarterback play. Like he goes to like the Raiders or Titans or somebody like the Jets or something like that. And people are like, I don't really want the number 2 receiver for one of those teams. And I can snag him with the 204 to 208 in a lot of my rookie classes.
I think he'd be the perfect Seahawk, where it's like people are like, oh, well, they have Kupp, they have JSN. What's going to happen early on? Well, guess what? Cooper Kupp's washed at this point, and they need an X wide receiver. And I think Jayden Higgins can be that X wide receiver. They just traded away DK Metcalf, slide in Jayden Higgins. He's got the size. He's got, this is the other thing too. He's got the speed. That was the one question mark that people had is, well, exactly how much juice does he have? 94th percentile speed score, 87th percentile burst score with that 4.47 he ran at the combine.
Yeah, like there's a lot of teams in the early second round that could use a number 2 receiver. Like I look at the Raiders, they have Bowers as their number 1. The Titans, they have Ridley as their number 1. The Jets, they have Wilson as their number 1.
Cowboys.
The Ravens, even too. Giants, like there's teams that you might not even think are really in on the wide receiver class that could use a guy like Jayden Higgins as their number 2.
Yep, for sure. And speaking, so you mentioned Higgins is your 6. He's my 7. We may as well go on to my 6 and your 7, and that is going to be Elic Ayomanor of the Stanford Cardinal. 6'2", 206 pounds, just under 22 years old. And we can both agree that we both think he was misused at the collegiate level. I do think he can play a lot of X wide receiver outside stuff, But I honestly think his best role in the NFL, given the 9.71 RAS, given the 88th percentile speed score and 85th percentile burst score, may actually be a move inside playing that power slot position.
Yeah, we refer to the combine as the wide receiver position specifically as just check the boxes. And both of these two guys, Higgins and Ayomanor, checked a major box because both of them had speed question marks. Both of them had athletic question marks, and they both ripped off 9.6 plus RASs. Like, that's really, really impressive for what they did. 4.44 at the size profile that Ayomanor is really impressive. He has size, he has strength, he can beat man coverage, he has athleticism like we saw at the combine. He is tough as hell. He's one of the best run blocking receivers in this class for sure. Downfield ability was there. And I say this about Ayomanor all the time. He's the Colston Loveland to the wide receiver position. His quarterback play was terrible, and he had nothing cheap. They didn't give him a screen pass. They didn't give him a short target. He had to beat a man coverage defender on every single play pretty much and earn every ounce of blade of grass that he had. And despite that, he has the 4th highest dominator rating of any receiver in this class.
Not many wide receivers can barbecue Travis Hunter for a full game. And I would say he did that with to the tune of 13 for 294 and 3 touchdowns in 2023.
Not to mention the game winner that he plucked off the back of his helmet.
Including, I believe it was the 98-yard catch and run. They were on the 2-yard line.
He's one of these guys where I feel like I'm too low on him, even though I feel high on him. Like, I'm like, dude, it wouldn't shock me if this dude ended up being a top 3 receiver when that's all said and done in this class.
I genuinely, when I watch him, see a Chris Godwin level mover. I see the toughness. I see the physicality in the open field. And I do think, again, I think he can play X wide receiver. And in fact, he could play it at a high level, hence why we have him where we do. But like I said, if he does move inside at the next level, is able to equip that toughness, elite hands, ability across the middle of the field, I'm all in.
I went for a little bit of a safer comp. My comp firm is Jalen Coker, the Panthers undrafted free agent who had a great rookie season there. Let me float this one out for you as like a potential high-end comp for him. I think this is kind of similar to if Rome Odunze had come out a year early.
I can see
like
it.
If he went back for his, like, let's say instead of coming out for the draft, Ayomanor transferred to a better program with a better quarterback, would a Rome Odunze 2023 productive season be out of his range of outcomes? I don't think so. I think he could have had a season like that if he had gone back to school.
Yeah, I mean, he had 1,100 yards as a first-year starter.
Yeah. And in an offense that threw the ball for 2,800 total. Like, this is a situation where you have to look at the advanced numbers and see the market share of production, because having 30 deep targets in 2024 when your quarterback can't throw deep and you're second in the class in deep targets is pretty insane, the level that you're winning on deep targets.
And on top of that, no matter what, everything overall, he's Canadian.
He is Canadian, of course. Classic Alberta man's, I believe.
Medicine Hat.
Yeah, Medicine Hat. He's a classic dude. He's a good player, man. I think there's going to be an NFL team that drafts him in the 2nd round to be their number 2 receiver, and he's going to give them everything that they bargained for. And I really do think that the Bears, Rome Odunze, is a realistic high-end comp for him.
Packers aren't going to take a 1st-round wide receiver because they're going to get Ayomanor in the 2nd round.
Yeah, he also screams AFC North too. Steeler, Raven, Brown. Like, one of those teams could definitely use a guy like this.
Dude, get this guy in a December game when everybody's worried about the cold and he's got his arms out, fucking warming up in a tank top before the game. That is the level of I mean, he's from Medicine Hat. I don't think the cold really affects him at all.
Yeah, and think about the Lions guys around the league now with the Bears, and specifically the Jets could use a dude like this, man. The Jets could use a guy with some absolute fight in him, and I could see him being like what they wanted Tim Patrick to be, Aaron Glenn's offensive kind of mindset, and the coach that he brought in. So Ayomanor's going to be a guy that I end up with a lot of in rookie drafts because he's probably going to go anywhere between like 206 to 212 in a lot of drafts, and if I need wide receiver help, I'm going to be throwing darts at him for sure.
And speaking of fight, I think we can transition to the next wide receiver in the class. If you need somebody that can go across the middle field and catch hospital balls for a living, Jack Bech will do that and not complain.
Yeah, dude, he's tough. That was the first thing I wrote down. He's tough as hell. Yeah. Strong hands, doesn't drop the ball ever, pretty much ever. He had the lowest drop rate in the class, I believe. And strong hands, like I said, at the catch point too. It's not just not dropping the ball. It's also working back through defenders outside your frame, making catches that you need to catch. Yards after catch ability, very solid. Sneaky athletic, you might say. Route running ability, very solid. Also kind of lazy comp, but like he's a ram. He's a ram, man.
Yeah.
Like he looks like a ram. He looks like Cup. He looks like Nakua. He looks like Woods. He looks like Whittington. He looks like all these types of receivers that they like. Even though he doesn't have great bursts, he didn't end up running a 40. I don't believe. I think 4.53 is kind of like a projection from NFL Draft Buzz. The long speed's a bit of an issue. Scheme-specific player for sure. You want him in a West Coast offense. You want him in one of those over-the-middle type of roles. And the production profile, it's not great. I mean, he outproduced Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. as a true freshman at LSU, despite being a 3-star recruit versus both of them being 4-star recruits. But he dealt with injury throughout his college career. He didn't really have much production until this season.
Yeah, and that would be the con. The main thing for him, for what it's worth, when you're just looking at the film, you could even argue him higher. I know Matt Harmon, for example, I believe has him as a top 5 or 6 receiver in the class. However, when we have to balance in the analytical grade in our prospect profiles, that's where he kind of falls to the wide receiver 9 for you, wide receiver 8 for me. Like you said, he is the modern big slot NFL wide receiver. You want this guy operating in the middle of the field with 240-pound linebackers patrolling because you know he will come down with the football. It's really that simple. Like I said, I hope for his sake he can keep himself healthy because he will put his body on the line to go convert you a third down. Guess what? If you're in 3rd and 6, if you're in 3rd and 7, and Jack Bech is lining up in the slot, the football is going to Jack Bech.
Yeah, at 6'1", 214, to have a 73rd percentile agility score speaks a lot about what he can do as a route runner too. Dude, this guy led the freaking receiver class in EPA per target. Like that's a hard metric to lead a class that has good receivers in it. Like, you know, Hunter and McMillan and all these dudes. Positive play rate. This is also speaks to exactly the type of receiver he is. 2nd in the class. Are you generating a positive play? Are you moving the chains? Are you getting a little bit more than you bargained for after the catch? That's exactly what he brings to the table. Is he going to house a 75-yard touchdown? Probably not. He can't do what Luther Burden can do athletically. He can't do what Travis Hunter can do athletically. He can't do what Matthew Golden can do down the field with his speed. But he's going to, if there's 12 yards available there, he'll get you 16.
Exactly. And that's what it comes down to. I feel confident in saying the NFL will value him as a 2nd-round pick because the tape is there, the intangibles are there, and the toughness is there. That's really all you need. Like you said, whether it's the Rams, whether it's a Rams mimic type of system, maybe the 49ers I was going to say maybe even the 49ers at the draft say, hey, listen, we got an offer from the Patriots for Brandon Ayuk, and we wanted to supplement that with a Jack Bech to play inside. I can see that type of system really prioritizing Jack Bech because there's just a value in a player that you know when you throw him the football, he's coming down with it.
Yeah, in the draft guide, which, by the way, we have not said throughout this, all the stuff that we're breaking down, the strengths, the weaknesses, the comps, all the ideal fits, that's all available in the draft guide. We have our top 25 wide receivers written up, graded, and all that stuff. Running backs we did in yesterday's video. We have all those guys written up, quarterbacks, tight ends, all that good stuff. And that 2nd or 3rd edition of the draft guide will be dropping like right after the draft is over. So all the updates with where they went and, you know, how they fit into their new offense, that'll all be live basically when you guys are ready to do rookie drafts. And you can get that by heading to the link in the description, flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE. The one thing I was going to say too was Jack Bech in the draft guide. I just listed all the Rams schemes because I was like, I need to know who like these all are. That's the Texans, the Patriots, the Falcons, the Jets, the Rams, the Jags, and the Packers. Those are the West Coast schemes that could use a guy like this.
Yeah, and I was going to say, obviously, it does sound like the Cowboys will take a wide receiver at 12, but let's just say Tat McMillan went off the board and they ended up getting a sliding Will Johnson. I can see them being very interested in a guy like Jack Bech with Brian Schottenheimer taking over the offense.
Yeah, and his projected draft capital is 68th overall. So about a late 2nd, early 3rd is what he's expected. I think given the because the other thing is he has a great story, great character, all that kind of stuff. I think that pushes him up into the top 50, like you said. And we both have it. We would both spend a top 50 pick on him. We have been graded as a top 50 player. So again,
good player. Golden
and Bech, both guys that, you know, we're analytics bros for the most part. Like I'm taking the plunge on these dudes. I realize their analytics aren't great, but I'm still doing it anyway. So let's move into the final 2 guys from this tier. We have Tre Harris of Ole Miss and Kyle Williams of Washington State, who's a guy who's been a bit of a late riser for a lot of people here. We'll start with Harris because he's been in the dynasty scene for quite a bit of time here. 6'2", 205, 23 years old, so a little bit overaged here, but he has size, he has production. Obviously, the 5.15 yards per route run, 100th percentile number, better than Devontae Smith's Heisman winning season. Of course, he only played 8 games this year, and a lot of those were against Furman and some dog shit teams that he did that damage against, but really high-end metrics. Yards after catch ability is there. The downfield ability, I thought, took a really big step in 2024 too, because in 2023, he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know how to run routes. He didn't know how to beat people deep. He was just running like an athlete with his chicken with his head cut off out there. Yep. But I thought I saw a lot more nuance, a lot more development. Contested catch wise, he was also brutal in 2023, and he really turned that around in 2024 as well. He led this class with 128.8 yards per game. That is a very sticky metric, folks. If you get yards like that, you are going to probably hit at the next level.
If you are just solely an analytics bro and you don't contextualize, okay, the Olma scheme is obviously conducive to success. Oh, okay, he doesn't have the most refined route running. If you just solely looked at his efficiency metrics, like you said, 128.8 yards per game, first in the class, 38% targets per route run, second in the class, 5.15 yards per route run, which is a record in the FSC prospect model, 0.64 EPA per target, 65.4 plus play percentage, which is first in the class, and an 89.4 PFF receiving grade, third in the class. Analytically, you can make the case this guy is a top 3 to 5 wide receiver in this class.
Yeah, and that EPA per target was also third in this class too. So that's a super, super high metric for all of these things. So again, Tre Harris, you got to watch the film. You got to appreciate it. He doesn't have a good route tree. He doesn't know how to release off the line of scrimmage really at all. But he did take a step forward in 2024. I want to reiterate that point because I think a lot of people will look at Tre Harris if they're just watching his 2024 tape and say, oh, this guy's a little bit raw. He doesn't really know what he's doing yet. But if you watch him in relation to 2023, he actually took a lot of steps.
Yeah, for sure. And again, he is an older player, so maybe you want him to be a little bit more further along because he is 23 years old. But just seeing the improvement year to year is really all we can bank on. Again, it is a little bit concerning that the sample size that we have this year were against the Furmans of the world, the lower class teams, but you cannot argue with the production. And it's actually funny because if I read you the production of my comp for him, in his final 2 years at college, so his second year actually, I stand corrected, true sophomore year in college, 89 receptions, 1,454 receiving yards, 10 receiving touchdowns, eventually was a 62nd overall pick in the 2017 NFL draft. Can you guess who?
It's Juju Smith-Schuster.
Juju Smith-Schuster. That's exactly what I see when I watch Tre Harris. There will be a learning curve, but if he is able to progress and he is able to land in the right spot, I mean, we saw Juju Smith-Schuster. Maybe he doesn't reach the heights of a 1,400-yard wide receiver because if we had the confirmation Harris would have a 1,400-yard season, he'd be much higher than where he is. But in terms of Juju, I mean, we've seen a consistent 800, 900 yards, 6 to 8 touchdowns on a year-to-year basis. I can see Harris being that complimentary number 2.
Yeah, and specifically to give you guys more context, Furman, Middle Tennessee, Georgia Southern, his best 3 games this year. His worst 3 games this year. He was injured, so keep that in mind. He was kind of playing through injury and stuff. But Florida, South Carolina, Wake Forest, those are better competition than the ones that he had the good games against. So again, you have to contextualize that. My comp for him is like Keon Coleman, where you kind of need to be a little bit patient with him. He's got a little bit of development to go. The one thing that Keon Coleman had in favor of him versus Tre Harris is that Keon Coleman wasn't even 21 years old the night of the draft versus Tre Harris is 23 already. So that's the one concern that you might have with Tre Harris is that he maybe should be a little bit more developed, but he's a bit of a late bloomer. He's not Jonathan Mingo. I'll tell you that for sure. He's not Jonathan Mingo, but he's more closer to Keon Coleman, but with like a slightly worse profile age-wise, but with a better production profile. So he's like kind of a weird prospect that you don't really see very often. I think he's going to be an interesting player for a lot of teams. I could see, again, a team like Denver who wants maybe a big slot or maybe a Washington. Potentially you use him. I think that would be a really good landing spot for him. You get him into the Commanders in the second round. Debo's there. Terry's there. You don't need to rush him. He's a third receiver to start his career and maybe develops into a 2 or maybe even a 1 long-term.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you there with Harris. There's a lot more meat left on the bone, and that's crazy to say about a 23-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. So Kyle Williams, the last one of this tier. Again, a little bit of a late riser, 5'11", 190, 22 and a half years old from Washington State. Hands catcher, great hands, big 2024 season production-wise, explosive, route running, downfield ability, all that's there. He has what it takes, really. I say it all the time. What is a receiver's primary job? Get open, catch the football, do something with it. Kyle Williams can do all 3 of those things at a pretty high level. His play strength is an issue. Size is a little bit of an issue. Average analytically. Run blocking, I thought he just didn't even care, to be honest. I didn't think he was like a very good run blocker at all, but that's totally fine. I mean, you don't get fantasy points for that. It's a benefit when you have it, but I'm not really going to hold it against you too much if you don't. I would say a lot of these teams looking for a good Z receiver, whether it's like a 2 or a 3 for your offense, would make a lot of sense. I have listed here the Texans, the Cowboys, the Titans, the Browns, the Jets, and the Bengals as potentially teams that could use a Z receiver like that. he's an interesting player, man. There's big Kyle Williams stands out there.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
people that think he's wide receiver 5, 6, 7 in this class. I'm not going to go that far with him, but I do think he's an interesting, I would say probably closer to a 3rd round rookie pick than a 2nd round rookie pick, but in a great landing spot if he goes top 64 in the draft, which I think he might. He's a decent player for sure.
Yeah, you can convince yourself, okay, does he have like Tyler Lockett type of upside? My official comp for him was a guy like John Brown. We saw John Brown similar, a little bit undersized, a little bit struggle with play strength. But I mean, people might think, oh, well, John Brown, do we really want to take John Brown in a rookie draft? John Brown had a couple 1,000-yard seasons, 6 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns, was a wide receiver 2-3 type in fantasy. If you're getting that level of production from a wide receiver 9 or 10 in a class, usually indicates that it's a pretty good class.
Yeah, my prospect model comps wise, he's kind of like a Tylan Wallace, a Kiki QT, somebody like that. Again, that doesn't bode super well for his like range of outcomes if you think about it like that. But for me, I think he's better on film than those guys were coming out of college. So you kind of just have to he's almost like the cheap version of Matthew Golden, where you kind of have to, Frankenstein his profile a little bit and just be like, yeah, this guy just has good film.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of cheap versions of other players, unless you have anything more on Kyle Williams, I think we can move on to the 3rd round rookie picks tier.
Yeah. I think this tier we can kind of rattle through just because we're going a little bit long on this video. And all these guys too, it goes without saying that it depends where they get drafted. But there is a couple of guys here that I do think will get drafted, potentially even in the 2nd round, if not the 3rd round at the very least. And I believe tomorrow or the day after, I'm going to have a video talking about hit rates, because I think one of the questions I get a lot from you guys is, how do I value a 4th round running back versus a 3rd round receiver, or a 3rd round running back versus 2nd round receiver, or whatever? And I think that video will answer a lot of those questions just in terms of what has hit over the last number of years, with how you should value players like that, in addition to some of the evaluation that you make of the players and the prospect model and all that kind of stuff. But Danny's got a little bit of a fall from grace with this first guy, because Jalen Royals was a guy that you absolutely loved. It was, I believe, like your 7 or 8 wide receiver, 6 wide receiver going into our first probably edition of doing this video.
Yeah, and I think I just was enamored with the movement skill set. I was enamored with the ability in the open field, that I was overlooking just how raw he was as a route runner. I had him at a 13 out of 15 as a route runner, and simply put, once you combine the reception perception, once I rewatched him, realized that I was too optimistic in that regard of his game. Again, still think he's a good player, and I mentioned a cheaper version of another player in this class, Kyle Williams to Matthew Golden. I think Jalen Royals would be like the discount Luther Burden in this class, where you see the movement ability, you see the fluidity, you see the instincts in space, but he just has a ways to go where he could be a full-time, full-fledged wide receiver. We both have him comped to a Jayden Reed style player. If he goes maybe in the mid to late 2nd or possibly in the early 3rd, I think that would be the sweet spot for Jalen Royals. And we mentioned, again, I'm assuming the Patriots by then will have solved the wide receiver position. But I do think if they were to wait and grab a guy in the 3rd round, Jalen Royals would be a very fun fit for them.
Yeah, and analytically, he has a great profile. Obviously, usually small school guys do, because, I mean, he dominated his team's targets. 11.57 targets per game this year. That was 2nd in the class. He had 119 yards per game. That was only Tre Harris had a better yards per game this year. 16.8% touchdown rate. I mentioned the touchdown rate for Matthew Golden. This was the only receiver that was better in this class in terms of his career touchdown rate. So he has good analytics. He has some redeeming qualities on film. Like you mentioned, the movement ability. He is good at the catch point, I think, too. He was really good in contested situations. Athletically, I think he's a really good athlete. I mean, 4.42 40-yard dash, a 64.1% contested catch rate is like, those are all really good markers. It's just, it's small school production. So you got to contextualize it. The release package, the route tree is not where it needs to be at this point in time. And again, this is one of those guys where you look at everything in rose-colored glasses and you're like, holy shit, this guy's a huge value. And then when you actually contextualize that it might take him 2 to 3 years potentially to get up to speed in the NFL, that makes me a little bit concerned. He also might have some medical concerns too, because he had a foot injury in 2024 that I've heard some people flag medically.
Yeah, it is unfortunate because, again, the sheer movement skill set, like I said, the ability in space, it's fun as long as he meets a baseline level of separation. And because of the small school, because of the lack of nuance currently in his route tree, I do think he has a development path to be able to take. I don't think at this point we can expect consistency in year 1, but if he does take the right strides, lands with the right wide receiver coach, really rounds out his game, I do think he still has one of the higher upsides in this class. And like I said, reminiscent of a guy like Jayden Reed, Jayden Reed's been that in the NFL. Jayden Reed has had games where we say, oh my God, this guy can be a top 8 to 10 receiver in the league. And then he'll have games where he catches one pass for 3 yards and is wiped off the field.
Yeah, and it's weird because Jayden Reed was also a reception perception darling, and Jalen Royals not so much. So even the route running of Jayden Reed has been a bit of a bugaboo for his ability to produce consistently. I mean, he also plays in the slot, so sometimes it's more of a usage issue. But yeah, I mean, Royals is an interesting player. I really liked him the first time I watched him too, but the more I kind of think about it, the more I think of how his projection is to the NFL. He's probably going to be more of like a third round NFL draft pick. Maybe he develops into something, maybe he doesn't kind of player than like, oh, he should be going top 50 or whatever. Like maybe we would have thought
that's where I was
earlier on in the offseason.
Sure. Like for what it's worth, the difference between wide receiver 6 and 11, like I said, I dropped his route running from, again, a very, very optimistic at the time, 13 to the 10.5. And that alone basically almost nearly knocked him from 6 to 11 itself, because that's just how close the 6 to 11 range is graded for me.
Yep. And Jaylin Noel, the teammate of Jayden Higgins, we already talked about. I have him top 11. I have Higgins at 6. So these are two really talented receivers that had to compete for targets. And despite that, I mean, Jaylen Noel's analytics actually are pretty solid. I mean, 4th highest yards per route run in this class against zone coverage, despite sharing the field with Jayden Higgins, who was 3rd in this class or whatever in targets per game. So that's really boding well for Jaylen Noel. He's 5'10", 194, almost 23 years old. Me and him, actually, fun fact, have the exact same birthday. So shout out to Jaylen Noel, classic September 4th lad. Good separator, good route runner. Matt Harmon gave him pretty high scores in reception perception. I think he's a smart player. And when you combine that with the fact that he ran a 4.39 at the combine and a 99th percentile jumps of burst score there, and good agility, 78th percentile, speed score, 72nd percentile. He's just a really good athlete. And I think he can develop into one of the better route runners in the league. You know, he kind of reminded me of a little bit as a Bucs fan. I saw a lot of this dude last year. He kind of reminded me of like faster Jalen McMillan a little bit, where both Jalen McMillan, we both liked his film, his ability to separate, but we thought he was more of a slot receiver. And that's kind of what I think of Jaylen Noel as well. The finishing in traffic was not a great trait of his either. I thought he had some drop issues and some, fighting through contact type of issues. He didn't face very much press coverage. I also like his yak metrics aren't good, despite of how good of an athlete he is.
Yeah, it is challenging. So my comp for him, vertical slot, wide receiver 2-3 in the NFL, similar archetype to a guy like Christian Kirk. And I mean, yours is actually Marvin Mims, who, if you guys had Marvin Mims maybe in your best ball team, or maybe you picked them up late in waivers for your fantasy football playoffs, had some very productive weeks, specifically in that week 17 game, I believe. He had like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Bengals.
Yeah, and Mims is the type of dude that has taken a while to develop in the NFL too. And I think that Noel maybe is that career trajectory, because we see these vertical slot types. Like the best vertical slot receiver we've really ever seen coming out of college the last 5 years is Josh Downs, and he produced right away. But Noel, I don't think, was like that level of producer and that level of like contested ball winner, despite Downs being undersized. He was just so natural with the ball in the air. So I think that's the difference between him and Downs. So I don't know. I like Noel. I think he's going to be a really solid, like 3rd round rookie pick type of player. I think there's some people a little bit higher on him than me.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of where I'm at with Noel. I think he's a fun prospect. I think late 2nd, early 3rd, take your shots on him. But for the most part, if somebody's more so on the early to mid 2nd portion, that's where I would fade.
Yeah, and Colorado State wide receiver Tory Horton is the next guy for us. I mean, Colorado State just pumps out number 1 receivers consistently in terms of what they did as producers. Like if you like, there's
Michael Gallup.
I think there's 5 Colorado State wide receivers in the prospect model who all produced at a super high level. Preston Williams, Tory Horton, Michael Gallup, like you said, Rashard Higgins, who is my official comp for Tory Horton. There's so many Colorado State wide receivers. It's hard to keep track of all these dudes. Downfield usage was really solid for him. That was the one thing that I loved about Tory Horton's profile, is that in 2022, I believe it was, he was a downfield wide receiver. Then in 2023, they used him as more of like a close to the line of scrimmage yards after catch receiver. It showed a lot of versatility for him to not just have, he's peppered targets every single play like Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky. He actually did a lot of everything in his Colorado State career. He had the yards after catch ability. He had the hands, had the athleticism that we saw from him at the combine. A 4.41 40-yard dash was not what I was expecting. He tested a lot better than I thought. And a 9.81 relative athletic score is really, really good for a receiver of his production profile. So he's one of these guys that I think in the 2nd and the 3rd round of the NFL draft, an NFL team is going to think, yeah, I mean, maybe this could be a number 2 receiver for us someday. And we didn't have to pay really much of a price tag for him. He's not a nuanced route runner at this point in time. He didn't really have the best reps against press coverage that I saw. There was a game against, I think it was Utah or Colorado or something that I was watching where they got in his face a lot and it really disrupted him. So
Was it 2023 Colorado?
Yes. Yeah. Colorado State versus Colorado, I believe, was the game that I was talking about. And he had knee surgery too. So medically, I hope he's okay from that perspective. But he's a fun player. And I think he's going to be a value for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that that game in 2023. Let me just see what the actual box score said. Yeah, 16 for 133. He just solely ran drags that entire game. I remember because I was watching him when we did the summer scouting at wide receiver. And it was the most Mickey Mouse game plan I've ever seen. It's almost like they were terrified to threaten Travis Hunter deep.
Yeah, the game I'm actually thinking of was Oregon State that they got in his face. It was one of his worst games of his career that I watched, and Oregon State got in his face and disrupted him. And that was the issue for him because that Colorado game was the total opposite. It was like, just get me the ball any means necessary.
Yeah. Literally just straight drags the entire game. It might have been the most boring games to watch from a prospect because there was really nothing to watch. It was just them saying, hey, you're our best player. Run this drag route. There's 4 yards of separation. They're playing off coverage. Go try to do something after the catch. And I mean, when that's your offensive game plan, it somehow worked to the tune of 35 points scored.
Yeah, and again, if you're going to be a small school guy, you better dominate, and a 51.6% dominator rating will do. That was the best season dominator rating of any wide receiver in this class. So he was the offense for pretty much the entire career that he was at Colorado State. He, I believe, played at UNLV before that. So he was also an integral part of that offense. So Tory Horton is a good player. I think he's going to be a value for somebody. I also kind of like him as like a big slot too, even though he can play on the outside and he has the size and the speed to do it. I actually think he would be better in the slot.
Yep. For sure. And we can move on to the next player. And speaking of just a slot player, I'd be shocked if Restrepo wasn't a slot only player at the next level. And I think the 4.840 at his pro day really confirmed it. Now, there is some context. Restrepo himself said that apparently he had been dealing with some hamstring issues, but what does he really have to lose by saying he was dealing with hamstring issues? Either somebody believes him and they don't knock him down the board, or they don't believe him and he's just in the same spot.
Here's the thing with Restrepo. He led college football with explosive plays at receiver. Yeah. He doesn't run a 4.8. Like, let me just put that.
I agree.
He does not run a 4.8. I do not believe it for 1 second. NFL Draft Buzz had him projected as a 4.51, which to me sounds about right. I think he probably would have ran in the mid 4.5s, maybe low 4.5s. Worst case scenario. Regardless, man, he does the things that you need to do as a receiver. Get open, catch the football, do something with it. Yards after catch ability, very strong. Hands, very strong. Route running, very strong. He's going to play in the slot. Doesn't really have a whole lot of appeal from a downfield slot ability standpoint because he doesn't have great speed, especially once you actually, if you are taking the 4.840 for what it is, probably doesn't even have NFL speed. But I just think analytically, he has a decent profile, even though there's some flaws there. The press coverage isn't going to be there. The speed isn't going to be there. But he's just a good receiver, man. He's just, if Tennessee, who's going to draft his quarterback, wanted to take this guy in the 3rd round and pair him with Calvin Ridley, that would make sense.
Yeah, I would agree there. And it's funny because he obviously played for Miami, and my pro comp for him played his NFL career in Miami. It's obviously low-hanging fruit because this guy is notorious for running a bad 40 at, I believe it was either combine or his pro day. But if you were to tell me he had a similar type of ascension to Jarvis Landry, and again, Jarvis Landry is a very polarizing figure because you can ask some people and say, well, he was very productive. He got a lot of targets. And then you can ask other people where it's like, well, were those targets really that effective? Were those targets really that valuable? At the end of the day, if we're playing fantasy football and we can get a guy in Restrepo, if he lands in the right spot, to get 7, 8, maybe 9 targets per game and be, again, I'm not expecting him to have a Jarvis Landry level peak where Jarvis Landry was literally a PPR back-end wide receiver 1 at some points, but a similar archetype in this modern NFL, I can see him being a Jarvis Landry light.
So I will say, anytime my radar has said this guy could be a PPR scam, it's been dialed. It's been dialed, man. Ladd McConkey, this guy could be a PPR scam. That's exactly what I thought of him last year, and that's what he became. Or at least in the playoff run, and he got a lot of people into playoff best ball as a result of it. Restrepo, he can catch a lot of balls, man. And St. Brown was the same way when he came out. It was just, this dude's going to catch a lot of footballs. And Restrepo becoming on the high end like a Golden Tate caliber player wouldn't totally shock me.
Yeah, and like I said, with Jarvis Landry, for example, the year I was talking about specifically, was it really valuable for your offense? 112 catches for 987 yards, 8.8 yards per reception. Like, realistically, that's not the most efficient way to play offense, but we don't care about offensive efficiency if these guys are getting spoon-fed targets.
Yeah, are you going to be mad if you spent a third-round rookie pick on a guy with a top 15 season in PPR? Like, you are not going to be mad about that. That's why I like Restrepo. Even though he ran slow, I hope he slides to like fourth round of rookie drafts because he ran slow, because he just doesn't run that slow. Like, watch the tape. He does not run a 4.8.
He's just a useful player. And again, probably will end up being a wide receiver 3, probably will end up being a slot only player, but he has the toughness, he has the hands to be able to impact that middle of the field. And I do think he will get the opportunity to do so despite the 40-yard.
Yeah, and Horton and Restrepo were both on my all sleeper team when I did them. They're both good receivers that I'm going to take in the third, fourth round of rookie drafts because I just think they're good receivers. And Tez Johnson's the final guy that we're going to close this video out with, hitting the hour mark now. Obviously, the elephant in the room is that he's not an elephant. He's 154 pounds. He is the smallest receiver.
Smaller than Corey.
He's literally at the same size as me, essentially. Yeah. And I would die on an NFL field. So that's a huge concern for what his durability is going to be at the next level. People be like, oh, what about Tank Dell? First of all, Tank Dell can't stay healthy. Second,
outlier of all outliers.
Tank Dell, outlier of all outliers. Third of all, Tank Dell's actually 11 pounds heavier than him. So if you think Tank Dell can't stay healthy on the field, let's see what happens to Tez Johnson. Here's the nice thing, though. If he can stay on the field, maybe can add weight or protect himself, whatever he's got to do, he could separate like nobody's business. He's got yards after catch ability like nobody's business. He was really productive. He also, by all accounts, has some of the best football character in this class, too. So you hate betting against guys like that as well. And his hands are reliable. He's got good athleticism, even though he ran a 4.51. It's on tape. He looks like he runs a 4.3. And he is undersized. He does not have functional strength whatsoever. And he was a redshirt senior coming out. And he's probably going to be a slot receiver and mostly work on screens. My comp for him is Tutu Atwell. At the high end of things, could he become, you mentioned John Brown already. John Brown was really undersized coming out of school.
177,
like 168 pounds, 170 pounds or something like that.
Yep.
I think at the absolute best case scenario, Tez Johnson turns into John Brown, Josh Downs, somebody like that. Absolute best case scenario.
Yep, I could see it. And like I said, I had Jamison Crowder as my comp. He was a little bit bigger comparatively coming out. He was listed at the combine, 5'8", 185 pounds. Now, obviously, there's a big difference, like I said, between 185 and 154.
Similar I'd be pushing weight at the gym if I was 185, dude.
Yeah, that's a good point. But just stylistically, being able to be that vertical slot wide receiver, probably going to be similar draft capital range. Jamison Crowder was a 4th round, 105th overall pick. I can see Jamison Crowder. I can see Tez Johnson kind of being selected in that 4th, 5th round range. And honestly, I think in terms of just ideal fit, it's hard not to think of his college quarterback and his brother. Basically, if you didn't know that, actually, I believe Bo Nix's family adopted Tez Johnson. Let's get him in Denver.
Yeah, I would. It's more or less a foregone conclusion that he goes to the Broncos. But here's the thing. Yeah. The one coach that size matters at the wide receiver position to is Sean Payton. He loves big wide receivers.
Yeah, that would be the issue, especially considering that Marvin Mims got blacklisted for the first couple of years, and Troy Franklin, a little bit, obviously he's tall, but he was very wiry, didn't really get opportunity this year, and they were using Devon Vele, the 6'6", 230 pounder in the slot just because he's big.
Yeah, dude. Sean Payton will put a warm body in there if they're over 200 pounds at wide receiver. Like he just wants size at that position. So yeah. I'd be worried about the Tez Johnson fit for Denver, even though obviously Bo Nix and him have a great connection. Like you mentioned, it goes beyond just that they played together in football. So Tez Johnson's an interesting player. Again, I would say he's got to be a 4th round rookie pick for me to take shots on him just because of how much of an outlier he would truly be if he ended up hitting at the next level. Here's the nice thing. It sounds like he has every makings of being an outlier from a character standpoint, production standpoint, all that kind of stuff. It's really tough to bet on a player that's this size. Like I would die on an NFL field, and he is the same size as me.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned late 3rd, early 4th round rookie pick, that type of range for Tez Johnson. There's a few wide receivers in that range because technically speaking, Tez Johnson is my 16. He's your 15. There's a couple guys. We can mention some honorable mentions right now. My first guy that would be on the list, but unfortunately didn't make it because you have him a little bit lower as well. I'm a big Ricky White guy. Ricky White, unfortunately, didn't have the fastest combine per se, but did kind of redeem himself, 4.49 at his pro day. He's got the production. There is some character concerns, which I'm sure you'll bring to light in a second, but this was a guy that had over 160 yards as a true freshman in a game against Michigan just a few years ago. So I think the talent's there, just a matter of him landing in the right spot. I do think if he is in the right spot, I can see a Jakobi Meyers level development. Again, not a guy that I expect to go in the round 3, round 4 portion of the draft, probably going to be close to a round 5, round 6 pick. But if he does land in the right spot, I do think he's a good route runner. I do think he has some ability after the catch to be able to develop into a useful NFL player.
Yeah, I dead ass think he's not going to get drafted. I think there's real smoke around his character concerns. And I mean, Jakobi Meyers didn't get drafted, so maybe that's a good comp for him. But I think Jakobi Meyers might work a little harder than he does. So that would be the issue that I would have with Ricky White. But I think he has redeeming qualities on film. I'm not going to say he's a terrible player. Isaiah Bond didn't make this list, which might surprise some people. Isaiah Bond also probably has some character concerns, but he does have great movement ability in space, speed and acceleration out the wazoo. He's undersized. He doesn't have much functional strength. He is extremely, extremely raw too. He doesn't have any idea what he's doing as a receiver, Isaiah Bond. But the good tape looks really good with Isaiah Bond. So his draft capital will tell all. Same goes for Ricky White too. If they're like 3rd or 4th round picks, that means the character concerns were overblown in my opinion. But they both have the risk of going like 5th to 7th round, or if not even maybe undrafted.
Yeah, and the other guy that I think has an interesting profile that some people might even have on their list in the top 15, we have Tai Felton here. Tai Felton for me was very interesting. Again, 9.62 RAS. He is a little bit slender at 183 pounds, but again, he does have some redeeming qualities, the ability to work after the catch. Again, he's going to be your typical, in my opinion, that Project Z wide receiver, probably going to end up being a 2 or a 3 at the highest range of outcome, but he is raw. It's probably going to take a couple years for him to get there.
Yeah, Tai Felton, my comp for him was Jermaine Burton, which I thought was like an interesting comp for him because Burton's got speed. He's got the ability to stretch the defense. Hopefully, again, Felton sounds like he's not as big of a head case as Jermaine Burton. I don't think there's any character concerns that I know of with him. So he's a fun guy for like the 4th, 5th round. He might even be a priority UDFA based on like how many running backs we have in this class and stuff and the tight ends. Like you think about a 4-round rookie draft, like how many times is Tai Felton even going to get drafted if he's like a 4th or a 5th round NFL draft pick? Like he might be just a guy that you can stash on your taxi squad. And I like him for those purposes, especially. And I also like Keandre Lambert-Smith for the same reason, because I think honestly, like this is hyperbolic, but his best 5-10 plays really do actually look like your boy CeeDee Lamb. Like honestly, like he looks like that good of a route runner on his best plays. Now his profile's bad. Like he's nowhere near CeeDee Lamb's profile, and his route tree was pretty limited. And he also is just a project in general, but he's got explosiveness. He can make plays after the catch. He has fluid routes when he's in phase and running them properly. He's an interesting player, man. If you took his best 10 plays, you'd think he was a 2nd or a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, and my comp for him, again, project wide receiver 3 to a guy like Chris Conley. Your comp for him, actually, funny enough, a guy that we were lower on consensus last year just because consensus wanted to raise him to top 5, top 10 level wide receiver status. But you have him comp to a guy like Devontae Walker. If you can get a much cheaper version of Devontae Walker, a guy that's probably going to be a priority pickup. I mean, Keandre Lambert-Smith, like you said, does have redeeming qualities to the point where if you're in a deeper dynasty league, maybe it's a start 11, start 12, and you have 20 bench spots, he's worth a spot on the taxi squad at that point.
Yeah, and Tez Walker was a little bit more stiff even than Lambert-Smith. I think he can move better in space than even Tez Walker did coming out of where did he come out? I don't even remember. North Carolina last year. I can't remember what school he even went to. Anyways, that is the end of the list. We went through our top 15 receivers plus, I don't know, some honorable mentions up to 20. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. If you want all of our rookie rankings, all of our dynasty rankings, our dynasty trade value chart will be updated right after the NFL draft. Our rookie draft guide will be updated right after the draft. All of the prospect model stuff, the running backs to targets and avoid, wide receivers to target and avoid, tight ends to target and avoid, all that stuff will be coming right after the NFL draft as well. And all the data for that will be in our draft guide. If you guys want our draft guide, head on over to flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up for 30% off, 7 days for free, a free team review and buy-sell holder report voucher when you sign up for an annual Mother Flocker package, and you save 6 months when you do that as well. So head on over to Flock Fantasy if you're interested. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.